This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining the To Hell and Back podcast, proudly sponsored by 6 Yards Out and Pearson's Bar. We're back for another opposition preview, this time looking ahead to a big game against Cardiff City at the MKM Stadium. So I'm joined by Cardiff City fan Tom Taylor. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm looking forward to this because it's the first time for months since October that we've had a home win to talk about as a Hull City fan. Although we were just discussing this before the episode began, Cardiff have not won a match since the last time Hull and Cardiff met. That was the second to last game, the penultimate game before the World Cup, and I was expecting you to have won at least one or two, but Cardiff have had a very bad time at the moment. They're 21st on 29 points. So generally, just give me a summary. How is it to be a Cardiff fan at the moment? And I assume not great.
Not really, no. Hopefully within the last kind of week or so with a new manager appointment, it can be a bit of a start of a turning point. Mm-hmm. But this season so far has been not the best. It's not been particularly fun. The performances haven't been amazing. I don't know how much actually put that on the players, more than just there's been a huge aura of uncertainty pretty much since we got rid of Steve Morrison at the start of the year. It's not been brilliant. The football's not been great. We don't get battered very often. I think the Leeds game in the FA Cup where we lost, I want to say 5-2. That was the only time where we've been properly battered, and it shows it. Which, in a way, it's almost worse like that because you know that teams that are good are almost kind of there for the taking kind of thing. So losing, I don't know, just by the odd goal or two, in a way, it's more annoying than if you get battered like 5-0 because you know you could have got something out of it. You could have snuck a draw, but that's been our problem, is scoring goals. We just haven't been able to do it for way too long.
So you said this season hasn't been very fun. Were you expecting it to be? What were the expectations when the season began, or was it just that it is going to be a bit of a relegation battle? Because I remember Cardiff signing out 10 players.
Yeah, so in the summer we signed 17 in total, which is a huge turnaround, and we gave the job to Steve Morrison, who was the manager at the time, and there was a feeling like something good was brewing. He had a great record with the under-23s. They were performing really well when he got the job, and performances did start to pick up a bit. They was starting to feel like a style of football was starting to gel, one that's not really associated with Cardiff. It was a nice possession-based passing kind of football, which for years we've just been known for long ball football under the likes of Neil Warnock and Russell Slade, and even earlier than that. So there was a feeling that Morrison was starting to make the team his own, and to be back like he was in the window to make 17 signings. All right, a lot of them were on frees or what have you, or for not massive fees, but he felt he was starting to build a squad that would suit his style of play, and he was probably didn't know his best squad, which is totally expected when you get that big a turnaround with new players coming in and some of the deadwood going out. You don't really expect absolute wonders in the first season. So at the start of the year, I was saying, a playoff push would have been absolute dreamland for us. But in all honesty, I saw us finishing about 10th or 11th, and still that would have been a good season because it was going to be a season in transition before we can properly push on. But the board obviously didn't see that. They didn't trust Morrison after the Huddersfield game. We lost 1-0 away. Missed a penalty there as well, which again, one of those annoying, could have got something from it. Yeah, but didn't. Like, the performance wasn't brilliant, it's weird. There's some performance. There was an away game to Middlesbrough earlier on in the season where we won 3-2, which nobody was really expecting. But where we are now, it feels like a million miles away from where we were at that point in the season, which is it is disappointing. I expected not wonders, but at least some kind of things to happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, but, I mean, it seems a little bit similar to what's happened at Hull, because we signed an awful lot of players and then they didn't really gel. We didn't know who the best team was. Even we beat Norwich very early on in the season and we thought we were going to have a good year. I've got down that Mark Hudson got sacked, but you were saying it's Steve Morrison, but I'm right.
Both. Both of them were.
So talk us through the managerial story of the season so far.
It's been entertaining for the neutral. Absolutely brilliant if you're a Swansea City fan or support Bristol, but for Cardiff fans, it's just been a nightmare. So as I said, Morrison unfortunately got sacked quite early on. Mark Hudson was given it temporarily, or at least it was supposed to be temporarily, just as an interim. The whispers were that they wanted to appoint someone a bit younger who could kind of revolutionise the club going forward, implement a new kind of style of football. Which I was like, well, why do you sack Morrison then? Which was a bit annoying. But they decided to give the job to Hudson, and things picked up a bit. He was starting to, somewhat gel it together. I do feel really bad for the guy. He wasn't ever going to be expecting to be in this position. He's inherited a team that he didn't build. And, he has to do the best he can with it. And we drew a lot, lots of draws. The football was a bit hit and miss. There was always a feeling that we could have got stuff from games, but scoring goals has been a real problem. It's like I said, we don't get battered in games. And that's where it was. We weren't losing massively. It's just results weren't brilliant. And then the board, in the infinite wisdom, decided they're going to sack him. And that was around early to mid-January time, when we were already under a transfer embargo, which has been partially lifted now. And now we've got Sabri Lamouchi, who I really hope can take us forward. It's an appointment that's got quite a lot of fans excited. For a while, we just thought it might be another, give it to, somebody like Sam Allardyce, whether he was ever going to take it or not, I'm not too sure. But there was that feeling it might be another Mick McCarthy-esque appointment where, he keeps us up, we give him it long term, he gets sacked in January and we're back at square one 12 months later, having not learned anything.
It's a dangerous cycle, that, isn't it?
It's a thing. Yeah. And it's one I thought we were going to go down again, but hopefully things can pick up under Lamouchi. And quietly optimistic, even though we've not had the best January, because for quite a few reasons, we've been a bit restricted on that front.
Yeah. So Lamouchi's come in. He was at Nottingham Forest, wasn't he, when they had a good season and then had the awful final game where they lost 4-1, and Swansea, your rivals, of course, got into the playoffs that year after scoring a few goals at, I think, Reading, and that was quite exciting. But where's he been since then?
Good question. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I didn't look it up. I was hoping you'd know.
Sorry about that.
But you think he's a higher caliber manager than the two you've had already this season?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think what's really important as well, he's brought in Sol Bamba as his assistant, who's ex-player for us, and he kind of summed up what was that last promotion team for us. It was greatly, it wasn't probably the best footballing quality, but we worked so hard that year. Yeah. And we made it work. kind of thing, and he was so instrumental to that. And the fans absolutely love him. He loves the club, and there has been, it's felt quite distant between the fans and the club this year. But I think to appoint somebody like Bamba as an assistant, it's bringing it back. And I think if you want to bring that connection back between the club and fans, then having somebody like Bamba on board is absolutely key. And I think they've got that spot on.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that sort of determination of grinding results out is the way to go? Because, I mean, with the amount of draws you've had, it seems like that sort of tight game where you're not playing very well and trying to get results hasn't really worked. Don't you need to find a way to start scoring goals, or is it that too difficult a task? Should it just be grind out results?
We need to score is the main thing. So I'm hoping we can get kind of that balance with Amushi and Bamba. We saw it before the last day collapse. Forest, like that season, they played some pretty decent football. So I'm hoping he can carry that over to this Cardiff team. And Bamba's there for but I think he's learning to be a coach as well and doing his badges and whatnot. So if he can learn from that, but also get a bit of fire in the belly for the boys, I think it could be a good two going forward. I just really hope the board stick with them, trust them, because you never know, they change their mind like the weather, and it's interesting where they run the club with being kind.
Okay, so you've mentioned the board a few times, and I'll have to be careful what I say here because, of course, I've discussed Jamie Carragher's comments about who the worst run club in the country is. Of course, Wales isn't in England, so I don't know about that. But I've seen Cardiff have had issues off the pitch. So are Cardiff one of the worst run clubs in the English Football League and Wales?
Yeah, I think we are. It started in 2013 when we changed the colours. That was, in a lot of fans' eyes, unforgivable.
A bit name change-esque.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I remember there was a game where Hull played at Cardiff during that Premier League season when we went down, and it felt like quite strong unity between us, between the fans and the ground, because obviously there was all the name change stuff and us playing in red and the new badge and whatnot. So it's just been pretty poorly run for a whole time, and for a long time, sorry. And it just seems to be a bit of almost like disconnect, but also they're not making it any easier for themselves, where they're almost refusing to appoint a director of football, where in the modern game you need one.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
And when we find ourselves in the situation we're in terms of incredibly limited on what we can do in the transfer market, it's absolutely crucial to get in somebody who's an expert in that kind of field.
Because you can't splash the cash on random players because you can't. You're not allowed to.
No. So that's just one of many things. I think the thing that summed it up the most to me was last season when we played away to Swansea in South Wales Derby early on in the year. It's when Mick McCarthy was still the boss. One of the directors, Ken Chu, the chief operating officer of the club, he went on one of the buses with fans just to go on and wish them well, kind of thing. And one of the fans apparently shouted out something along the lines of, "Can we get a new manager?" Referencing McCarthy, and he said, and he just laughed and said, "Oh yeah, I hope so."
Well, do that then.
It's it was the biggest game of the season up to that point. We went out and lost 3-0. I think it was.
You don't want to hear about that. You don't want to hear that sort of thing before a massive game like that, do you? Really? No. Yeah. So of course, you said the January transfer window has not been great. It closed yesterday. How was it then? Because I saw you've signed. Is it Sori?
Sori Carver,
from Denmark. Is that the only signing you've made?
It was the only one we made because we've been quite limited. We were placed under embargo for a while because of payments for Emiliano Sala, and
Right.
but we've paid the first instalment now after there was a High Court ruling. So there was a partial part of the embargo was lifted, so we can loan players and recall players from loan. I think we can sign players on free transfers.
It's the same for Hull last season.
Yeah.
It was loans, free transfers, and almost went down because of that. Couldn't really improve the squad.
So we got Carver in on loan from Midtjylland, I think the team's called. Seems like a pretty decent striker. I can't say I follow the Danish league all too closely, but I'm seeing some good stuff about him on Twitter. So, hopefully he can be a part of that, be a part of our system, and hit the ground running pretty quickly. But perhaps even more important than that was we managed to recall Mark McGuinness back from Sheffield Wednesday on loan.
Okay.
Why we sent him out on loan in the first place, I have no idea. But he's a young centre half. I thought he played really well for us last year, and now he's come back into the team since we've been able to kind of do a bit of business. And I thought he's done well so far, and he's a massive welcome addition back.
I think I saw that he's your highest rated player this season. Of course, he's only played the 2 matches, but and hasn't kept a clean sheet yet. But it's only been the 1 goal conceded in both of those games. So let's talk about. Well, just say, if you need a striker, he's got a few goals in Belgium. I don't think he's done as well in Denmark, but hopefully that's the firepower you need up front. Because I think, I don't know who the Cardiff top goal scorer is at the moment, but I know Robinson, who was a big signing in the summer, he's only got 4. So, I think that's definitely something you need to work on. But let's talk about the Luton game, Lamouchi's first game in charge of the club. Quite tight until, it was 0-0 until the last few minutes. Luton won it. Only had 36% possession, so under the cosh. What did you make of his first game in charge?
Not particularly brilliant. To be fair to him, I wasn't expecting anything particularly awe-inspiring. To be fair to him, he's only been there since I think Friday would have been his first training session, and straight away he's going to a team that are going to push for playoffs, if not promotion, with Luton. So I don't think he's particularly disgraced himself there. It's kind of what I expected, unfortunately, to go away to a good team like that. I didn't think we were going to get that new manager bounce straight away and win 3-0.
Especially from away from home, perhaps in front of your home fans, maybe. And the next time he'll have actually had some coaching time, because he won't have had much time between Tuesday and Saturday either for the whole match.
So it was unfortunately kind of what I expected. It wasn't the best performance, but we have to put it behind us. We have no option but to just move on. We're not really in a position where we can dwell on any kind of games or poor results, and we seriously need to start picking up wins pretty quickly, because in January, February you can kind of get away with it if you're near or around our place. So it takes us a decent run of form, and then all of a sudden you kind of push into lower mid-table, a bit like us last year. But it needs to start somewhere, and it really needs to start quickly.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We've gone from relegation candidates almost to hoping that we can push for the playoffs, and maybe not ever get into it, but at least get into 10th or 9th or something like that. And that's just been in the space of a few weeks. So I was looking at the statistics, and Luton, they had most of the ball, and of course Hull finally got their home win after I think 10 home games or 8 or something like that. The seniors' first one as Hull manager, and that was because I think QPR had more of the ball, whereas the previous few games against Blackpool and Huddersfield, teams lower down, they've held they've been very tight and we've had the ball and we've not been able to break them down. So I'm thinking that could be quite similar for the Cardiff game. How do you see that going? Do you think they'll just sort of soak up the pressure? Because I think that's the best way to play against us, because we're not great at breaking teams down.
Probably. It's going to have to be the way, really. Hopefully, for the sake of all the fans travelling, it will be pretty fun. But in all honesty, it's going to have to be just try and soak up a bit of pressure and see if we can hit on the counter.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the way to play against us. I mean, Blackpool and Sunderland, those home games, those teams went down to 10 men and we were 1-0 down at both times and had to get quite late equalisers. So I think, yeah, definitely almost parking the bus, hitting on the counter, definitely the way to play against us. I mean, of course, you've not won since the World Cup, and now we've finally got that home win, but we are usually one of those teams that give a team a win if they need it. So what's your feeling? Do you think you can get something out of this game? Because really, Hull fans should be quite positive going into it, but because we're that team that likes to give, easy wins away, I'm not so sure.
Well, saying that makes me a little bit more confident, in all honesty.
It's typical City. That's what we do. Typical City.
Kind of, it's one of those ones where, there's a few teams that when we're in the position we're in, where we need to pick up points quickly. Hull is probably one of those, no disrespect to you guys, but one of those teams you kind of want to play at that point, because the teams around us is the three below us are Blackpool, as you said, Huddersfield and Wigan. And I hate playing teams that are in relegation fights, because it just means so much more when they've got just as much to get out of it as we have. So I'd rather be playing a team like Hull, who are a bit higher up than anyone who's immediately around us.
In the middle. That's exactly how I was thinking about the Blackpool Huddersfield games and this one. And then, of course, QPR, they're above us in the table. At the end of the season, really, the ideal games when you're trying to stay up or go down, or not go down. No one ever tries to go down. Get into the playoffs. You want to play those teams with nothing to play for on the beach. I'm not saying QPR are on the beach, but they're on the slide, and I don't know whether they're thinking they can get in the playoffs because they've had such bad momentum, whereas Cardiff are going to really be fighting for it, especially trying to impress a new manager, so it could be quite a difficult one. We've got, a slightly, I don't know how new to call it, but relatively new feature. I've done a combined lineup of the Hull City and Cardiff City teams. So what do you think about this? Because I was considering putting 11 Hull players as a joke, but I think still I'm always adding a centre-back because our defence isn't the best. It's better at the moment. And then a centre-mid because I think Greg Doherty is a bit inconsistent, and Tufan is as well. And then a winger because most of them are injured. So it's Robinson, Wintle and Kipre from Cardiff in the lineup. Other than that, it's 8 Hull players. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's pretty fair.
Good.
There's a few Cardiff players, and I think you can make arguments for that you could potentially include, just because they've been good or they've been shining lights for us in what's been a pretty naff Cardiff team this year, or just what's just been a pretty poor season. So I think you could probably make a case for Perry NG. I think he's a really good centre half anywhere in the back line when called upon. He's played pretty well. That's probably the main one, Perry NG.
Yeah, I mean, I was considering putting him in, but I think Christie's been one of our best players. I think I start these off. I put one striker up front. Oscar's, I mean, there's like 1 or 2 players who have scored more than him this season, so he's always a shoe-in unless we're going to play Middlesbrough with Akpom. And then Seri and Christie. And then if Cardiff, it's a bit controversial. I only put players in that aren't injured. So Greaves was injured last week, but Greaves, Christie, Seri, Oscar up front, Oscar Estepinian, they're always in. But then other than that, it's a bit different. So thanks for saying that's not complete nonsense, because I was brutally criticised in the last podcast when I did the QPR and Hull lineup. But so I guess last thing to do, that's the combined lineup. But what do you think Cardiff will play on Saturday? What's the formation to begin with?
I think probably 4-2-3-1. Maybe that's more.
Plays that.
Yeah, well, yeah, everybody does it, but it's kind of not wishful thinking so much, but I think it's probably our best chance of any kind of success to go with something like that. I would go with Sori Kaba up front. I know it's asking a lot in his first game, in a game where we desperately need points.
Got to play at some point.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'd go with him. Probably Callum Robinson from the wing, because he's done well up front. I think he plays a lot better on the wing with a sort of more like bigger striker up top, like with Keon Tete sometimes this season. I think Kaba, from what I've seen, is probably just that bit above Tete. But I think he will still end up really good someday. He's still really young. But I would definitely start Kaba. Thrown him in at the deep end a little bit, but like you said, they've all got to start at some point.
Okay, fair enough. And lastly, how do you think the match is going to go? What's your official prediction?
I think it's going to be tough. Like I've said about pretty much every game this year. I can't say I've gone into one.
Well, that's a miserable season, isn't it? Every game's tough.
Yeah, so I say I don't think it'll be easy, but now that Lemouche has had a bit more time to gel with the team, maybe he can just start to get a little bit more, start to get his players to know his players. A bit better. The fact that we just need to pick up points, and instead of a team like Hull would probably be the perfect opportunity. I think it'll be probably quite scrappy. So I'll go. I'm going with my heart, maybe not the head. I'll go with a Cardiff win. I think I'll say 1-0. I think from what you've said, that Hull kind of struggled a little bit in breaking teams down this year. And the fact that when we do score, it's not really loads. We'll score 1 or 2, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go with probably a bit scrappy and somewhat unconvincing 1-0 Cardiff win, where Hull probably have most of the possession and shots, but we managed to keep it tight in midfield and at the back. So I'll go with 1-0 Cardiff.
Fair enough. Well, I think I'll go the same, except a Hull win, 1-0 win. I mean, looking back, I think QPR, they had more of the ball. We were able to lump it over the top of them. Whereas it's going to be like Blackpool and Huddersfield. It's going to be a tight game. I think, if we hadn't won the QPR game, maybe it would be another 1-1 draw, because we love those, just adore them. I've never seen you at home. But I think, we might be able to just get over the line. It will be tough to break Cardiff down, because we're not great at that. But I think just because we won the last one, hopefully that'll give us a bit of momentum going into this. But I think it is going to be quite a tough, close game. At home we're still not that good, and Cardiff, have drawn a lot, and so have we. So either way, it's not going to be 3-0 to either team. It's going to be a tight one or a draw, most likely. I think a draw is probably, quite close. Probably the most likely result. So thank you very much for coming on, Tom. Good luck to Cardiff, after this game. I hope you get completely battered on Saturday. I'd like that. But yeah, thanks very much again to everyone who's commented and liked and retweeted, all that sort of stuff. We really appreciate the support. So thanks again. Thanks, Tom, again. Are you going to the game on Saturday?
I don't think I'll be able to make it, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, if they do get battered, at least you won't be there to witness it and have to, drive all the way home, because it's, of course, a long trip. So if anyone is going from Cardiff, safe travels, and hope you're miserable on the way back. So, but miserable, but safe, of course, definitely safe on the long journey. So thanks again, and we'll be back probably tomorrow with the main episode. Thanks for listening.